Hey everyone, Panos here, co-founder of PNOE, and today I'm very excited and honored to have with me Rene Sousa, right?
Yep.
Awesome. I was just making sure I'm not butchering your name.
No, you're
So
good.
Rene is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete and has been using the PNOE device alongside one of our affiliates in order to understand what is happening with his performance, physiology, and obviously find the missing links to get him to a state of better performance. Um, Rene, thank you so much for joining me today and discussing all of your journey and insights that you've gained from PNOE.
Yeah, really excited to be here. And I think it's our duty, right, as like humans here on Earth, not to just like learn stuff and keep it for ourselves, but share, right, and make a difference. So thanks for all that you guys do.
Of course, yeah. Renee, why don't you give us a little bit of background on, your career up until this point? I know a lot of athletes today, not just professionals, but also weekend warriors, try to experiment with different things, whether these are tests, modalities, recovery techniques. So it would be nice to hear about your story. What have you learned so far, not just from PNOE, but from all the things you've done, and then we can double click and dive into PNOE.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I've been competing like on the world stage for the last like 5, 6 years. I've traveled the world doing jiu-jitsu, competing in jiu-jitsu, coaching like UFC fighters, doing all these cool things. And really like maybe in the last like 6, 7 years, like as I've gotten to the top level, I've realized that like recovery is the only way that you can train as hard as you want, right? So just learning how to recover, learning the proper things behind nutrition, sleep, all these things. It's always been like a slight, like little, like formula to tweak, because truly the end number at the end of the equation is your performance, right? And that's kind of like what we all want to focus on. Um, so like I've learned a lot of things. Especially like I went to college for like engineering and like science and stuff. So I was like, okay, data, answer, data, answer, data, answer. But not everybody's the same, right? And not everybody has this like exact formula of like what each person needs. So I think some of the biggest things I've learned is just like the basics are the most effective, like sleep, like nutrition, like proper recovery in terms of like after training, pre-training, like little like routines and things like that. I've learned that like really have helped me get to that next level. Learning how to like monitor your breath and things like that. Things like meditation. Those have all really helped me. Um, but at the same time, it feels like when you get to the top of like how much you can actually push your body, you feel like you can't go that much more. So a couple of months ago, I connected with Dr. Asari at Aether Medicine, and I told him, I said, hey, honestly, my number one goal is for me to just recover faster. Like, I don't care about putting on muscle. I don't care about doing any of the things. I just want to be able to recover faster because sometimes I'm training 30 sessions a week and it's like a lot on
Oh,
my
wow.
body. So it's just the recovery is the hardest part in that, right? Like I'll meet with different dietitians and nutritionists and stuff, and they're all like, yeah, like eat like 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. I'm like, dude, but I still need to train 3 times today. So it's tough. But Dr. Sari, like really like the way he approached my plan was like on like a very like personal level and a very like small scale like cellular level. So we've been able to implement a couple of things. And PNOE was one of the first things that he introduced to me, and I was like, never heard of it. I thought I had heard of it. It's Greek, right? PNOE, I mean, it's in Greek.
PNOE stands for breath in Greek, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think my pastor had actually told me that, and yeah, and he we
Is
would
he Greek or no?
no, he's not. But we were talking about breath and we were talking about like God and some other things. So then I saw Pinot. I was like, okay, interesting. Let's check this out. But right off the bat, I wanted to know where I was, right? I wanted to know like exactly how my breath is connected to my muscles and how my muscles are working with my metabolism, because I know I have a really good metabolism. And I just wanted to see how everything worked out, you know? So just doing this first PNOE test and learning a lot about my about how my whole system regulates together was really really effective, and just like knowing what are the things that I need to work on, because like, you know, my goals are like to recover more, but what is that, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, I want to put on muscle mass. So that means I had to like take more sessions off and stuff like that. And really only in a couple of months, learning a couple things from PNOE, I was able to like hit almost all of my goals that I wanted to hit. In terms of like, I put on like maybe like 15 pounds, and I was able to like really just achieve just some strength goals that were really holding me back for a while. And it was like definitely catered to like some things that we learned from PNOE that it would have been like things that you would have to follow me all day and tell me what I was doing wrong. And PNOE was able to like be like, no, like this is what you did wrong, you know?
Especially when it comes to putting on muscle mass, where the insights that we gave you related to nutrition that actually helped you put on this additional muscle mass?
Yeah, so it was my my metabolic flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Said I was
Yeah, or metabolic rate. Because
metabolic rate,
okay,
either
yeah,
one.
yeah.
They didn't look good. Like
Okay.
Dr. Sorry called me and they was like,
What?
dude, check this out. And I was like, what? He's like, everything looks good, scores are good, but like says like you might have a heart attack soon. I was like, what? Not nothing like that, but just like right for some disease and stuff. And it's because two things: because I eat very late, and then the other thing is because I like train so much. I eat a lot of carbs. I don't eat a lot of fats and stuff. So those were two things that we just tried to make a difference right off the bat. It's like, and for me, it was just like a simple formula. It's like, okay, don't eat as late and just eat more fats. The other supplemental thing that I haven't really been able to integrate, because I had like a big fight recently, and I had to kind of focus on that. But the other thing PNOE suggested was some more zone 2 training so I can burn more fat, right? Which doesn't make sense that much, or not that it doesn't make sense, but it's like, because I understand why it wants me to burn fat, but it's like right now I'm already like only like 12% body fat. You know what I mean? So like not much more to burn, but it's just about like how to keep that, how keep your metabolism burning, right? Rather than like me kind of like, especially like, I think the late night eating is a thing that's messed up my sleep over time. So I think fixing that has been really helpful too.
So a little bit of science for our listeners to kind of explain how these recommendations were given based on the scores that we calculated for Rene. So whenever someone is metabolically impaired, and metabolic impairment can have multiple different elements to it. It can be I'm not burning enough calories, right? Or it may be I'm not able to burn enough fat, which, you know, these are two different circumstances and statuses. But in the case of Rene, what we are discussing here is that Rene wasn't as good in fat oxidation, which, you know, is bad because, you know, you will end up building up fat, but it's also a marker of your metabolic flexibility and mitochondrial function. And then that pretty much means that if you're not as good in burning fat, it means that your mitochondria are not working as effectively. That means that you cannot recover as well because now mitochondria cannot clear fatigue metabolites. Secondly, your mitochondria will not rely on fat as much as a fuel source. And as a result, they will rely too much on carbohydrates in order to power your metabolism. And that creates a problematic state for your recovery as well. And so there's a few things that can get you to that point of mitochondrial impairment. Um, First, you may be a deconditioned individual. That's not the case with Rene, but you know, we test a lot of general population people, average Joes, and you know, they are very deconditioned. And the first thing they need to do is go through a training regimen in order to build up that mitochondrial function. In the case of someone like Rene, that's not the case. For you, it's more likely the case of overtraining, eating too many carbs, eating maybe processed food, eating late at night, and a combination of all of that. And so whenever that happens, you may start to see the mitochondrial function of someone who's not as fit, even though mitochondrial function is there. It's just that the adverse lifestyle, whatever the case may be, is not allowing mitochondria to work effectively. So when you start to switch out things in your diet, organize carbohydrates earlier in the day, organize calories in general earlier in the day, then you pretty much, end up alleviating some stress off of your mitochondria. And then ultimately that allows you to burn more fat throughout the day, recover better, have an easier time not building fat or, discharging fat from your body. And that leads to a better performance overall, is pretty much what happened, Rene.
Yeah, yeah. So it happened in a perfect timeline too. I think I did my active test in late November, or I think yeah, late November. And then I had 2 months off. I was like taking a kind of pause off of like a competing. And then January 2nd, I got like a really big opportunity. I had a fight this 2 weeks ago and just truly went into it like the best shape I've ever been. And really like I think PNOE was one thing that just like was able to like help me like guide my direction in where I saw any holes or where I needed any work. Was able to like put on the muscle mass, went up one full weight class, which is kind of tough to do, like keeping body fat low, but I was able to like last time I was fighting like 170. This time I fought 185. And I ended up cutting from like 210. So I was like pretty big to cut down all the way to 185. But it worked out pretty well, and yeah, felt really good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And something else that's important to highlight for our listeners is that zone 2 training, which is also called the fat burning zone training, is not only there to burn fat, it's there predominantly to induce mitochondrial biogenesis. And through mitochondrial biogenesis, we end up burning more fat. So even if you have someone who's like extremely lean, right? Instructing the person to do zone 2 training is still very important, because if this person doesn't train their mitochondria, and doesn't go through this process of inducing mitochondrial biogenesis, then you may end up experiencing a decline in this function, and then you start to lose your ability to remain lean. And also, as we said before, good mitochondrial function is not just important for keeping fat off, it's important for recovery, it's important for overall health, it's important for hormonal balance. And so zone 2 training is sort of the most powerful type of training in order to train your mitochondria. We build muscle at the gym lifting weights. We build mitochondria when we are doing our, long rides or long runs. I mean, long is, obviously, quote unquote, depends on the fitness level of the individual, but you guys get the point. So awesome, Rene, that was very helpful. And let's talk a little bit about breath.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we tend to think of metabolism and then breathing and cardiovascular function as three distinct functions. But, one of the notions and things that we always like to talk about in PNOE is how this trifecta of the oxygen chain, that includes our breathing apparatus, lungs, and obviously our airways, then secondly, our heart and circulatory system, and then lastly, our cells, are actually one big machine that's called metabolism, and that breathing is a very, very important part of that machine. So talk to us about your experience with breathing, why you got into it, and how it has helped you become a better athlete.
Yeah, let me think. I'm like 27 right now. I probably started breathing when I was born, right? But like intentionally breathing, maybe like 10 years ago, like really like learning how to like utilize it. And I think it kind of started like with meditation and stuff like that. So it kind of just like started the idea of like just like awareness to my breath. But then I started like doing different like counts of breath work, doing different things like box breathing,
Mhm.
um, Wim Hof, stuff like that. And then even like recently doing like some like free diving, like really learning how to like optimize my breath. Um, but really like the biggest goal was just to like in jujitsu, you will like you die, we say, if you like lose your breath, right? If you go into that like state of like hyperventilating, which people are like, oh, I'm never gonna do that. But then like 1 minute in, somebody's on top of you, you can't get them off, you start to like panic, right? So I think like in my early jiu-jitsu journey, I already understood how to master my breath. But then as I started getting to higher levels of competition, I needed to like in that first 2 minutes of the match, if I'm not mastering my breath, I'm not going to be able to go for 15,
And that's
20
the case
minutes.
with many sports, like martial arts sports, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard many UFC coaches say that the moment you open your mouth
Yep.
is the moment right before you get punched in the face,
Yeah.
which is very similar to what you're describing here. And
Yeah.
again, short parenthesis, a little bit of science for our listeners.
Yeah.
The way that the reason why that happens is because of how our sympathetic and parasympathetic system
Yeah.
works, and how it's connected to our breathing. The sympathetic system is connected in the upper part of the lung, and then the parasympathetic in the lower part of the lungs. And so whenever we start to hyperventilate, which occurs when we open our mouth, then immediately the sympathetic system is going to get activated. And that's the fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
And
And that's what changes the part of your brain that you're in too, though, right? Like
Mhm.
it changes stay alive to like, I'm okay. I can do this. Like what were the things you did in training, like footwork, head position, you know what I mean? Like, and if you don't feel good there, like a little
Totally.
bit
Yeah.
more.
Whenever the
Yeah.
sympathetic system kicks in and, everything in the body is just focused on staying alive, you cannot remember your training. You cannot remember footwork. You cannot remember, maintaining your guard up. And so inevitably you're going to get punched in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so even,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
So even like the awareness of that is like tough to be aware of it, but then the mastery of it is huge, right? So I just truly put in a lot of work into like training and like breathing, training and breathing, training and breathing. And it's one thing that like one of my instructors really never like taught of me about, but he was like, hey, that's really important. I was like, read, learn, TED Talks, whatever, you know what I mean? As many people as I could learn from. And truly, like, without my breath, I feel like I could have only done 20% of my results that I've ever done. Like, so many,
Oh,
I mean, my breath centers me before I go out. My breath focuses me as I'm on the mat. And I'm able to just push, like, especially like maybe in competitions, like, usually a lot easier than training, but in training's usually like so difficult, like so
mhm,
difficult. And
mhm.
without breathing, like during when I'm fighting and then in between rounds, I wouldn't be able to do it because I just like I feel like I go from my truly my whole body feeling like lactic acid, can't move, can't do this, no thinking, to like you give me like 30 seconds, a minute, and I can just reset. I'm back to 100%.
And that's a very interesting segue to the concept that breath work in and of itself can have multiple different functions. Like breath work is a performance tool. Breath work is a mental reset tool, but then breath work can also be a physical reset tool. And so, when we change our breathing, as I said before, we can upregulate or downregulate our sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So we can, you know, force our system to go back into reasonable and conscious thinking, which is the, parasympathetic state. Even though it would be kind of impossible to do that through sheer will. But when we only think about changing our breathing, then the biochemistry of the body will inevitably help you and push you into that desirable conscious state of thinking. So a very powerful tool in this direction. But then the way you breathe and, going back to the, concept of hyperventilating, when you hyperventilate, you don't only push your body into the sympathetic state, you also blow off too much CO2, and then blowing off too much CO2 means there is less CO2 circulating in the blood. And a lot of people tend to think of CO2 as a waste byproduct of metabolism that pretty much is useless and has to be discarded through exhalation. But in fact, it's actually, according to many, the most powerful hormone, in the sense that if you don't have a lot of CO2 in the blood, or you don't have enough CO2 in the blood, you're not going to be able to deliver oxygen across all of your tissue and your cells. You need oxygen to uncouple oxygen from hemoglobin. You need CO2 to uncouple oxygen from circulating hemoglobin so that it enters the cell and, metabolism takes place. And so whenever we get into this state of hyperventilation, we also get into the state that's called hypocapnia, so not a lot of CO2 in the blood, and that ultimately reduces whole body oxygenation, which means that brain cells do not have the oxygen they need to operate. That's why we start to think less effectively. Reaction time goes down, but then also down to our muscular level. There isn't enough oxygen going into the muscle, and so the muscle is going to go more into an anaerobic state, which means more fatigue metabolites, which means more fatigue buildup, and ultimately performance goes down. So all of that stuff, may just be, influenced momentarily by how we switch our breathing. So that's why athletes like you, Rene, focus now so much on breathing, especially in the world of martial arts.
Yeah, and I think like even like people at first are like, I can't sit there with my breath and blah blah blah. I'm like, dude, at first, even just the analogy or like the idea of like using your diaphragm, breathing in through your nose, like those things, like it's like a PED, I feel like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it really like just teaching somebody like, okay, use your mouth, but like just try to like slowly inhale through your nose. Start at the bottom of your belly button, expand your ribs, go up, 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 and just like, just like learning that like there's more breath for you to have, things like
No,
that.
totally, totally. And there's a bunch of different techniques, each one for every type of breath work. There is breath work for recovery, there is breath work for, during training, there's breath work during competition, there's, all these kinds of different breathing techniques. Breath holds is a big thing, right? Increasing your CO2 tolerance through breath holds. And so, yeah, definitely a very interesting space for people to um, dive into and appreciate and uncover maybe things that can help them tremendously with their lives. Something else that is kind of tangential, but I think it's going to be very important for our listeners, is that breathwork is also one of the most powerful things for overcoming respiratory disorders. When it comes to respiratory disorders, asthma, COPD, sleep apnea, if you look at the traditional medicine 2.0, you're not going to find a lot of treatments, drugs, or operations. And so for many people, result comes from some sort of breath work. And, this is something that as a company, we try to help a lot, and we try to push a lot our audience into that, because, not only is it a, drug-free and, harmless way of dealing with these problems, it in many cases may end up being the only solution or long-term solution. So yeah, just a short parenthesis that breath work is not just about improving performance. It can
It's
actually
fr-
be about,
it's free too.
yeah, it's free. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like I don't know, the amount of people I feel like I help sometimes, like
Mhm.
just friends or something, like even like for example like just traveling this weekend and I like see somebody, I'm like,
Mhm.
relax, like
Yeah.
just chill, you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
and like you just see like the
Mhm.
the like I'm like, hey, take a deep breath, like we missed our flight, what are you gonna do, you know what I mean? Like it's all good.
No, totally,
um
totally.
just understanding that kind of stuff.
Rene, besides PNOE breathwork, what are some other things that you like to do as an athlete? What are some other things that are important for you, covering nutrition, training, and recovery?
I think I've played with I went to Australia a couple years ago and
Hmm.
traveled a lot and like was like, oh, I'm doing this like vegan and plant-based thing. It worked for me for a little bit, but truly like just with the caloric intake that I needed to do, I found like my happy median between like eating maybe like 30% carbs, 40% carbs, and then like a lot of like protein, maybe like 40% protein, fats, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So definitely like because I do so much, just finding like a mix of certain things, that sit well for me.
Mm-hmm.
So like understanding that, um, things like sauna, I think that's like one of my favorite things to do. Cold plunge, maybe like a couple times a week. Um, and and honestly, just like uh, the biggest thing that I like what was maybe like a little bit hesitant to, but definitely has helped a lot recently were like peptides and stuff. So peptides, right under a licensed doctor, under supervision and stuff like that, was something that I was like maybe like a little bit hesitant about, but has truly like changed my sleep, changed the way like I'm like lifting, changed the way that I'm recovering. So like, and I don't know, I always tell people like go do your own research, but all the research I've done has like really like led me to like believe that this is like a really good option for me or anybody else that needs anything like that.
No, totally. A lot of people are, experimenting with these things. I try to be plant-based in some cases, but I also have kind of realized that it's not always, feasible, especially under conditions of high exercise volume and when you need to get, someone's caloric intake to very high levels because exercise intensity and volume are, through the charts. Um, Peptide is a very big thing. We see a lot of our affiliates, finding ways to push people into peptides. And I would say in the, world of athletes and professional sports, it's gaining a lot of traction. There's undeniably a need for, you know, um, a lot of supervision when it comes to peptides because we've seen, um, a lot of dubious and, questionable practices in the space, but, it's kind of inevitable with every emerging space, I guess.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure. And truly like I think the more times I do PNOE, so like probably at least I'll do it like two more times this year, maybe more. But I'm just excited to keep looking at the research and what it's saying that I'm like I need to get better at and just continue there. So right now I just had a pretty big fight. I'm probably gonna take a little bit of time off
Hmm.
and we'll like get back to this like zone two training and stuff like that. And like one thing I didn't include before was right? Like you said, like runs and things like this could be helpful. I honestly just like wore my heart rate monitor and like for my training that I was already going to be training. Um, and most of the time I'm training and like my heart spikes, like, right. Cause I'm like somebody's attacking me or I'm defending or something. But I tried to just keep my heart rate monitor on and just stay in zone two. So it's just like something like I was like kind of like self monitoring and stuff. I never was able to hit like even the hour mark, like even if I was training for like 2 hours or something specifically in zone two. So I definitely have to like do my zone two specific training on a weekly basis coming up. But that was something that like, you know what, I'm already training. Why don't I just take down the intensity a little bit and keep my heart rate like in that zone two level? So, um,
Hmm.
but I'm excited to see like how the different things that PNOE suggests for me
Hmm.
to try out to really take it to the next level.
Totally, totally. Um, awesome. So for anyone who wants to learn more about PNOE and how it can help specific types of individuals, specific audiences, whether, it's longevity, weight loss, performance, we have a link that we just posted on our chat. You can click there, schedule some time, and you'll talk to one of our team members who can give you a lot more information about, how you can use PNOE and whatnot. And I think we have a few questions that, one person raised his hand. I think you can use the Q&A, um, or a few people, two people now have raised their hands. You can post questions on the Q&A. Um, window, and we can address them with Rene. Yeah, doesn't look like these two people have a question. I think they probably accidentally clicked the button. But anyhow, Rene, it was very nice to have you on the webinar. Thank you so much for your time, and you're gonna be tested with PNOE again. How soon?
Probably next 2 weeks, next week or so.
Okay, that's awesome. Cool. We look forward to seeing your results and seeing the progress. And, perhaps once you do a few more of these PNOE tests, you can come back and, share more about, how things you implemented in your training and your day-to-day actually led to different PNOE results. That would be super cool to see and discuss.
Yeah, I love the data, so we'll definitely be happy to share.
Awesome. Cool.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank
Rene,
you.
thank you so much for your time, and we'll stay in touch. And
Sounds
thank you
good.
everyone for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.